This story starts like many others, with everything falling apart with the end of the world. But this time, it wasn't just one thing that caused it, it was a bunch of crises happening all at once. A pandemic, war, economic decline, and food shortages. But these ominous signs weren't where things stopped. The real disaster came when these game-like characters, known as monsters, showed up, and they nearly pushed humanity to extinction. Well, what happened after was pretty predictable. Just like in the novels, metahumans with special powers started showing up. 3 days after all the madness kicked off, we find a junkie casually munching on chips and drinking soda, like it's just another lazy Sunday afternoon. And honestly, this is a good sign. It shows the world hasn't completely ended, and this junkie, having his laid-back snack, is a living proof of that. But even though he's alive, he's completely alone. And that thought makes him pretty sad. He's the only one left in this 100-square-meter apartment, with his mom, dad, grandpa, and grandma all out now. You see, his father ultimately decided to buy this place, and he took a loan of 200 million won from the bank. Not only that, he also used all of the family's assets, which were also worth 200 million won. The reason our protagonist is staying here despite not being born into wealth is because there was a condition to qualify for certain tax benefits. To receive these benefits, someone had to live in the property for at least 2 years. Since the protagonist's family couldn't leave it empty, he ended up staying there in order to fulfill this requirement. That's why he's been stuck in this apartment, locked in ever since the sudden apocalypse hit. He looks at his phone, no internet connection, which leaves him even more saddened. But just then, a loud roar shakes the area. He cranes his neck up and spots a monster gliding through the sky, heading straight for his apartment. As it gets closer, it opens its filthy mouth, ready to devour him. The guy gets absolutely boggled out of his mind when he realizes that this thing is about to eat him alive. But as he braces for the end, something odd happens. He looks in front of him and notices a system notification flashing on his screen, telling him that a subject who wasn't even permitted entry is trying to enter. As surprising as it seems, our boy is not surprised to see this system window at all, because the defense mechanism is the only reason he's made it this far. But this system has also become one of the worst nightmares as well. He tries everything, swinging at the door, kicking it as hard as he can, but it just won't open. It's been 3 days since the world ended, and this damn ability is the only thing keeping him alive. But it's also the reason he's trapped inside this apartment. He sits quietly in the night, alone, staring at the system window flashing in front of him. It says that the ultimate shut-in cannot leave the house. Of course, this pisses him off. He's been dragged into this mess, and now he's being given some fucked up title as if it's like most glorified shit to have. He feels powerless, having no control over his situation. His biggest problem has started to surface now, which is his food supplies. The electricity has been cut off since yesterday, and he's been surviving on side dishes from the fridge. But those won't last much longer, and all he has left are a few packets of ramyeon. Right at that moment, his system window pings with a notification telling him that he has hunted a calican and earned a significant amount of EXP in the process. His skill level has also increased because of that. The guy is completely bewildered to hear this. He looks outside and sees the monster's lifeless body lying on the ground, only to realize that now it's the monster being eaten alive by those damn goblins. It's hard for him to swallow that he literally hunted the monster in self-defense without even realizing it. Meanwhile, the system is notifying him that he's gained a new skill and that a nearby loot has met the requirements, and it's now calculating the loot. Just then, he hears a bunch of nasty roars. He looks down and sees the goblins going absolutely crazy after devouring the monster's flesh. It seems like the food they were partying on is starting to disappear, and the goblins are pissed to see it slipping away from their grasp. The reason the body is disappearing is tied to the system. The system then states that the loot calculation is complete, and our protagonist has received around 2.2 million won. Right at that moment, the lights in the room flicker on, meaning the electricity has been suddenly restored. The system then displays more information, revealing a new skill called House Declaration, currently at level 3. It's a passive skill, and no one can enter the house without the ruler's permission. Another passive skill appears, Dignity Preservation, at level 1. To preserve his dignity, half of the house's functions will be restored. The system also shows that his wallet level is maxed out, and the money he has now totals around 2.2 million won. The shut-in can barely contain his happiness when he sees the power come back on. He rushes to the fridge to confirm, opens it, and it's running. Not only that, there's water in the taps now, and the electric stove is working too. Excitement bubbles up inside him, and he lets his emotions loose, literally crying tears of happiness to see everything reverting to how it was before the world ended. But with a pinch of salt, he grabs his phone to check if the network is back. To his dismay, the network is still down. He's obviously disappointed to see that he still can't connect with the outside world. But right at that moment, his eyes catch a pen drive on the ground. He picks it up, plugs it into his PC, and when he plays the files, he finds memories his parents recorded. It's a collection of moments from his childhood and the journey of his life, showing how he grew up step by step. This hits the shut-in hard as all these memories make his heart go numb. He wants nothing more than to see his family again, and he vows to bring them here, no matter what. He stands up, his resolve steeled, but before he can get too caught up in his righteous thoughts, a system window grabs his attention. It tells him that he can now buy items listed in the store at original prices. This is something completely new, and the shut-in is left stunned for a moment since he was not expecting this at all. Curious, he presses the store icon. The system window pops up, showing him the money he has and the option to list items. Since the system is displaying how much money he has, it seems to be linked to his wallet. Anyhow, he decides not to dwell on the situation too much, so he opens his balcony window. Before he can step outside, the system stops him with a warning. He still cannot leave the house. Well, he expected that. Even though his skill level has gone up a bit, he's still trapped. One thing is clear though. If he hunts monsters, his level will increase, and he'll likely unlock new skills. Maybe one of those skills will let him go outside. The problem is that he has no idea how to kill monsters in his current state. Situations like the one with the Calican aren't exactly something he can count on happening again. But that is when an idea takes place in his mind. He might be able to take out some goblins. So he grabs a water bottle from the fridge and, with a quick swing, he throws it as hard as he can. The bottle goes flying out of the apartment. This momentarily makes him happy, because initially, he was worried that he might not even be able to throw objects outside. He then decides to take it a step further. He grabs a dumbbell and heads to the balcony. As he steps out, he notices something unusual. The goblins are there, but they seem to be moving away from the area, dragging chunks of meat from the dead monsters. They're basically retreating. This makes the shut-in anxious, seeing his last chance slip away. Without thinking, he hurriedly swings his hand as fast as he can and throws the dumbbell out. But instead of hitting a goblin, it lands on the dead monster's body, and in return, it catches the attention of the furious goblins. His heart races in fear as he realizes they've spotted him. Now, he's sweating bullets, absolutely terrified. He still has one dumbbell left, but he doesn't want to waste it by throwing it out again. But the problem is, he doesn't have anything else in the house that could help him kill these monsters. And he sure as hell isn't strong enough to throw a TV or computer out the window. He watches the goblins getting more furious, completely bamboozled by this bastard who's been throwing stuff at them. Seeing them so riled up has the shut-in sweating his balls, realizing that the goblins are now ready to tear him apart. They charge toward the building. But strangely enough, this situation isn't all that bad. In fact, it's exactly what he wanted. The goblins are coming closer, and now he can hit them without missing. This is his chance. He suddenly remembers the store option he had gotten earlier. He quickly activates his system panel, opening the store, and then presses the list item option. The system asks if he intends to list the dumbbell, and he agrees. The moment he does, the system scans the dumbbell, and he's unlocked the dumbbell in the store. He can now buy more for around 17,001. The shut-in is quite surprised to realize that the price listed is exactly what he paid for the dumbbell online, which makes him believe that the market rates here are the same as before the world ended. So he ends up buying 2 of these. Once the transaction is complete, the system window flashes with this blue light, and the dumbbell starts to materialize. This leaves our boy absolutely glowing with happiness. His joyous screams even leak outside of his apartment. The next moment he throws the dumbbell as hard as he can, and bam! It smashes into this green bastard's head, taking him out for good. In the process, my guy earns some EXP and around 3,001 as well, which is promptly deposited into his wallet. He's thrilled to see the reward, while the goblins below are left panicked and bewildered, staring at their fallen comrade. Before they can finish paying their respects, though, they notice another dumbbell flying straight toward them. All of the goblins scatter and scramble to save themselves, so the dumbbell hits nothing. Shut-in is absolutely annoyed for missing the shot, so naturally he spends even more money and buys 3 more dumbbells. He throws them right away, and this time he takes down one of the goblins. The system quickly notifies him that he's just taken down a level 6 goblin. As usual, he's earned some cash, but most importantly, his skill level has increased, and he's unlocked a brand new ability. Turns out, he's gained access to an alternate dimension where he can store items. Excited, he commands the system to open the storage. When it does, the system asks if he wants to place the dumbbell inside. Without hesitation, he agrees. The dumbbell begins to pixelate, and a system window pops up, confirming that he's successfully stored a non-slip 3 kilos dumbbell. Then, the system asks if he'd like to summon an item from storage. His face lights up with joy as he eagerly says yes. The dumbbell instantly materializes in his hand, leaving him thrilled at the realization that he can now summon items from storage to any place he wants. With the dumbbell back in hand, this bastard grins with this wicked smile because he could barely contain his intrusive thoughts he is having, already imagining all the possibilities this new skill offers. So he decides it's time to execute his ultimate plan. He takes his sweet time buying dumbbells and storing them all. Once he's done, he commands the storage to open, and with a single command, a bunch of dumbbells appear, as if he's holding the key to the gates of Babylon. He lets them rain down like he's Gilgamesh himself. The goblins can do nothing but watch in awe as the massive number of dumbbells falls toward them. Some of them are absolutely terrified, and as soon as the dumbbells start to hit, he starts claiming all the experience points as the goblins drop dead one by one. In total, he earns just over 54,001 from this one swing. The system then asks if he would like to list additional items, and my guy quickly says yes. Since the max amount of items he can list in the store is 10, he lists around 10 items, including groceries and anything else necessary. He even sells the dumbbell he used to defeat the goblins and gets his money back. But suddenly, he notices something peculiar. Apparently, he's just lost 1-1. He thinks for a moment about what might have caused it, and then it clicks in his mind. It's probably because the refrigerator is on, and the electric, gas, and water bills must be eating into his money. This news is pretty concerning for him because he doesn't have any way to make more money to cover his household expenses. You see, after he hunted the goblins by dropping dumbbells on them, those stinky cowards ran away and abandoned their old home. Since then, he's only managed to kill 2 more goblins, and he's not sure if there are any other creatures left in the area to hunt. When he looks below, all he sees is the rotten head of a dead monster. Shut-In knows that if he doesn't find something to hunt soon, he's screwed. So he has to figure something out, no matter what. He stares up at the sky with his dejected face, hoping to spot a flying monster he can hunt. And it looks like luck is on his side, because he suddenly spots a giant monster gliding straight through the skies. Shut-In is momentarily shocked, but he doesn't want to waste the opportunity that fate has handed him. He quickly rushes to prepare for the hunt. He ties a big spoon to a ladder and extends it over the balcony, since he can't step outside the boundaries. Then, he starts flashing the shiny spoon to grab the monster's attention. Not surprisingly, the monster finally notices the shine coming from the building, and as soon as it locks its eyes on him, it charges straight toward Shut-In to try and eat him alive. Shut-In is pretty pleased to see he successfully baited this dumb monster, and when it collides with the barrier, its head bounces back. Shut-In is confident this is a done deal, and level up is on his way. But just then, the monster starts flapping its wings violently, sending powerful gusts of air at Shut-In. The air pressure from the monster's wings is so intense that Shut-In can barely stand, constantly getting pushed back. Eventually, the monster vanishes from sight. But when our boy peeks through the balcony, he's shocked to see the creature sitting right outside his window. The creepy thing roars at him with its mouth wide open, its twisted tongue dangling around, saliva dripping as it eyes our boy like a tasty snack. Shut-In, on the other hand, is too terrified to move. The monster then shuts its mouth and slams its hard beak into the barrier. The system flashes a warning right away, warning that an unauthorized entity is attempting to enter. But no matter how much force the monster exerts, it can't break through. Each impact seems useless, yet the sheer strength of its attacks leaves Shut-In bewildered, and he is doubting if this barrier can actually withstand it. He doesn't want to take any chances. So he quickly opens his store and checks out all the listed items he can buy. From what he's observed so far, the loot calculator only activates when a corpse is nearby. And his goblin hunts haven't always been successful because of this very reason. Some survivors had taken the corpses of their fallen allies away, and those corpses weren't calculated as loot. In other words, if the distance between the body and the player exceeded a certain limit, the loot calculator wouldn't activate. Shut-In doesn't want that to happen, so he wants to figure out if there's a way to take down the monster in one shot. That's when he notices the 900 milliliter bottles of canola oil stacked in his store. Without wasting any time, he quickly buys 10 of those bottles. As soon as the transaction is complete, all 10 bottles appear right at his feet. He grabs them all, then places a pan on the stove. He pours all the oil into the pan and turns on the heat. Next, he grabs his broomstick and wraps a bunch of disposable paper around it, taping it securely. He soaks the paper with oil, then opens his store again and lists the boiling hot canola oil. The system successfully announces that the boiling hot oil has been listed. After that, he grabs the lighter and gets ready to torch the soaked paper. The paper quickly catches fire, and when he walks to the window, we see that the monster is still perched on top of his apartment, waiting for its prey to come outside. Little does the monster know, its prey is actually the predator, and the monster is about to learn that the hard way. Shut-In quickly summons the canola oil, and all of the boiling hot oil pours right over the monster's head as soon as the system window activates. The oil splashes down on it, and the monster starts screaming in agony, which is quite understandable. But the pain doesn't end there, because Shut-In is ready to turn up the heat, figuratively and literally. As soon as the fire touches the oil-soaked monster, it ignites instantly. The monster's deafening screams of agony are like music to our boy's ears, a victory whistle he can almost hear. Eventually, the monster begins to collapse to the ground, and the sight of it getting cooked alive is so horrible that Shut-in's face momentarily sours. As soon as the monster hits the ground, its misery comes to an end. The system window pops up, congratulating Shut-in for successfully defeating a Calican. He's awarded a massive amount of EXP, his skill level increases, and he even unlocks a new skill. But that's not all. The system also detects the hunted monster and registers it as loot. Once the loot calculation is complete, he receives a reward of just over 9 million won. Shut-in goes bonkers to see such a massive amount of money. He can hardly believe his eyes. But before he can fully recover from the shock, another notification pops up, which reveals that the requirements have been met, and territory expansion is now underway. Suddenly, the entire building starts shaking like crazy, or at least this is what Shut-in is feeling. He also feels a strange sensation gripping his heart, and his perspective begins to expand. This strange feeling intensifies, making his heart ache even more while his senses continue to grow and grow. At one point, he literally starts seeing into the other apartments in the building, where he finds a surviving family in there, which completely bewilders him. He'd never thought there were neighbors living here besides him. His eyes suddenly change color, and he has no idea what's happening to him. For some reason, he can see people now, but he doesn't understand why. Just as suddenly, he recovers and starts observing things around him as he normally does. Then, the system introduces these unexpected neighbors. The first adult is Choi Hyung-jun, a husband in his late 30s. The second adult is Park Hae-won, his wife, also in her late 30s. Together, they have 2 daughters, Choi Na-yeon, their 6-year-old firstborn, and Choi Se-yeon, their 3-year-old second child. The system goes on to state that these individuals meet the requirements to be taken in as citizens of his territory. It asks him if he would like to grant them citizenship. Shut-in is obviously not sure if he should grant him citizenship or what would happen if he didn't grant them. The system immediately answers that any beings not granted citizenship will be expelled from the house and left vulnerable to monster attacks. Faced with this stark reality, Shut-in decides to take the high road. Instead of being a selfish Shut-in, he chooses to be a generous landlord. Once the command is given, the system announces that Choi Hyung-jun, Park Hae-won, Choi Na-yeon, and Choi Se-yeon have all been granted citizenship. Shut-in feels pretty great about this, because he might have unlocked other skills related to citizenship too. So he decides to check. That's when the system announces his new skill, which is known as Ultimate Eyes. But Shut-in isn't fully satisfied yet, so he tries to scan the system to see if there's anything else related to citizenship. The system flashes a new notification regarding skill, which is known as Ruler's Declaration, a passive skill. This skill ensures that no one can enter the house without the ruler's permission. There's also an icon called Citizenship Management. Shut-in quickly decides to explore it because this is exactly what he was looking for. When he opens it, he sees that all 4 citizens are listed, along with their power levels and trust levels. But the detail that stands out to him is that he can hold up to 600 citizens. 600 is no small number, it's pretty staggering. He presses on one of the citizens' names and sees all the information about them. There's even data on their experience distribution rate and money distribution rate. He's also given 2 options. He can assign a quest to this citizen or expel them from his territory. He has no idea what the experience and money distribution rate are all about, but he guesses it might refer to how much experience and money the citizens share with him, and the fact that he can control the rate. Well, this sounds like a cheat code to him as he is the one to decide how much money he wants. He then notices the quest option and wonders how it works. Out of curiosity, he presses the button. A new screen pops up, allowing him to customize the quest description, deadline, reward, and even the penalty for failure. Without much thought, he quickly assigns Choi Hyung-jun a simple task: kill 1 goblin within 168 hours. The reward? A small amount of experience. The penalty? Nothing, at least for now. The system prompts him to confirm the quest. But before pressing yes, Shut-in starts wondering just how far he can push the penalties. To test it, he changes the penalty to death upon failure. To his shock, the system accepts the prompt without hesitation. He doesn't confirm the quest though, and the system cancels his request automatically. There's no way he'd actually kill someone over failing a quest. He is quite troubled to see this actually. The idea that he has the power to kill any citizen at any time, just with a penalty, makes him deeply uneasy. He starts thinking about what he should do now, and that's when he uses one of his newly acquired skills, the Ultimate Eyes. His perspective begins to broaden, and he can literally see everything. Once again, he spots the family down there. The family seems troubled, and the wife asks her husband what they're supposed to do now. The husband, Hyung-jun, has no clue what they're supposed to do. The least he can do is go out and fetch some water, so he tells her to stay here with the kids and wait for him. But his doting wife, Haiwan, isn't on board with that idea since the area outside is crawling with monsters. Hyungjin knows this too, but he doesn't really have another choice. His wife then points out that he might not even find water, but he reminds her there's a convenience store nearby, and since it's a pretty big one, so there should be something there. The thirsty kids start begging their father for some water, which only makes Hyungjun feel even more pressured to go outside. Finally, he decides he has no choice but to venture out and get what his family needs the most. He tells his wife to trust him, promising he'll come back soon. Since Hyewon doesn't have a better option, she lowers her head and lets him go, though it's clear she's terrified. At that exact moment, my guy shuts off his skill and suddenly, we're snapped back to his apartment. Our shut-in didn't realize just until now how bad things had gotten out there. He opens his store interface in order to see if he can increase the store storage. When he activates his window skill, he notices that all 3 storage-related skills are still at level 1. But the good news is they can be upgraded with just single points, and he currently has 3. This realization makes him happy as hell. The system prompts him, asking if he wants to increase the level of the ultimate shut-in store skill. Without a second of hesitation, my guy chooses yes. The system window lights up with a glowing blue light, and once the upgrade is complete, the system announces that the store is now at level 2. The number of items he can list has been increased to 20. As a bonus, a 10% discount has also been applied to the prices of all items. After the upgrade, he realizes he still has 2 points left. After thinking it through, he decides to invest them into the store and the dignity preservation skill, since there's a chance he might encounter more citizens from now on. Eventually, he ends up leveling up his store again. Once it hits level 3, the number of items he can list jumps to 40, and he unlocks a new feature, the ability to restore items. It's basically a function that can turn old, worn-out items back into new ones. It doesn't sound half bad, and honestly, my guy is thrilled he pushed the storage level to 3. Without wasting time, he opens the store and purchases some Samdesu water and Jeju tangerines. He then decides to upgrade his other skills too. The system prompts him, asking if he wants to increase the level of the ultimate shut-in's dignity preservation skill. Of course, he says yes without hesitation. My guy has a clear plan in mind. If he provides essentials like electricity and water to his neighbors, he can request all sorts of things in return. With the dignity preservation skill now at level 2, he unlocks a new feature, the ability to register vassals, though Shut-In has no clue what that even means. Meanwhile, Hyungjun is ready to leave his house in order to provide for his family. Haiwon could barely stand to watch her husband leave them behind like this, but the man reassures their little girls that he'll be back shortly. He encourages them to be brave and protect the house while he's gone. The girls, though, are visibly terrified. They don't want their father to leave, their small voices trembling as they beg him to stay. Hyungjun then gives each of them a gentle pat on the head and promises he'll bring back food and water for everyone. He tells them to listen to their mother while he's away. But then, one of the girls reaches her breaking point. Tears start streaming down her face as she reminds him about the monsters outside. The scene transitions to the recent past, a moment frozen in time, back when the two girls were happily playing together in the park, as if the world wasn't on the verge of collapse. But then everything changes. Chaos erupts as goblins suddenly flood the streets. The girls freeze, the joy on their faces replaced by sheer terror. They bolt from the playground as fast as their little legs can carry them. The older sister instinctively grabs her younger sister's hand, pulling her along as they run for their lives. But just then, their father grabs the older girl, while the mother grabs the younger one, and the entire family runs for their lives. As the father recalls the terror from the past, he hesitates before stepping outside. He doesn't want to leave his girls behind, especially since this could be the last time he sees them if he steps out. But he has no choice. A man's gotta do what a man's gotta do. Just then, the doorknob starts rattling, taking everyone by surprise. Hyungjun cautiously walks toward the gate while gripping a golf club in his hand. The rattling on the door suddenly stops, but the silence is broken when a voice from the other side asks him to open the door. The voice of another human from behind the gate terrifies Hyungjun even more. He struggles to believe that there's actually a person behind the door, but it could also be a monster, so he doesn't want to take any risks. Our boy on the other side of the door keeps calling out, while the man inside takes his stance. But then, the voices stop again, and the silence makes him believe that whoever was there has left. Out of nowhere, the front gate swings open, and the blinding light that pours through forces him to quickly pull his family in close, instinctively protecting them. But of course there's nothing to worry about, it's just our boy standing there with a plastic bag full of supplies. Hyungjun questions his identity, and Shut-In introduces himself as Kim Jae-hyun, from next door. He explains that he has some water and tangerines, and after they eat and drink, he'd love to sit down and talk for a bit. We finally know our protagonist's name, so from this point onward, we will use his real name instead of that shut-in title he got. Hyungjin is surprised for a moment. Now that he thinks about it, his family desperately needs water and food, so he doesn't see any reason to refuse the help. He got a nagging feeling that this boy might actually be able to assist them in their struggle. So Hyungjin warmly welcomes our boy Jaehyun inside. Meanwhile, the little girls are totally creeped out of their minds. They have no idea who this stranger is, and their unease is written all over their faces. Their hesitation is so obvious that even Jaehyun can sense the tension, which makes him wonder if his sudden appearance gave them too big of a shock. As he sits there, he looks around and notices how dark the place is. It's clear that this family has intentionally covered the entire apartment with curtains, which he finds to be a pretty clever move. It definitely reduces the chances of being spotted or attacked by monsters. The first thing on Jaehyun's mind is to bring some light into the room. He focuses his thoughts on this single task, and suddenly, the room lights up. Hyungjun is left surprised to see the lights come back on, while Jaehyun pulls out a bottle of water and tells him to just treat his children with this, as there's no time to be surprised. The man grabs the water bottles and hands them over to his girls. Both thirsty girls start gulping down the water, and each sip feels more satisfying than the last. Seoyeon, the younger girl, even chokes a little from drinking too fast. Once they're done drinking, Jaehyun decides to treat them to something else. He pulls out a tangerine and hands one over to Seoyeon. The girl's eyes light up as she drools at the sight of the sweet, juicy fruit. But before she can dig in, her mother decides to peel it for her. After removing the peel, she feeds the tangerine to her daughter. The juicy sweetness bursts in Seoyeon's mouth, sending her neurons into absolute overdrive. Her cheeks tingle with the sensation, and she can barely hold back her excitement. Her mother asks if it's good, and Seoyeon nods, barely able to contain her joy as she responds with a simple yes. The older sister Nayeon eagerly starts asking for some tangerine too. Once she takes a bite, her reaction mirrors her little sister's, which is just pure joy as the sweetness takes over her senses. Meanwhile, Jaehyun is bombarded with notifications from the system. It seems the trust levels of the entire family toward him have increased. Seoyeon's trust has even reached 50, unlocking her loyalty stat, which has now surpassed 30. The system informs Jaehyun that Choi Seoyeon has fulfilled the requirements to be registered as a vassal, and has even reached level 2. He reflects on this for a moment. Although she meets the requirements, she's still so young. Unlike regular citizens, he can only register up to 10 vassals, and they need to be capable of carrying out orders, at least at the level of Choi Hyungjun. Although the little girl's trust has skyrocketed, her father, Hyungjun, is still at 31. And since Hyungjun is the key person in the family, Jaehyun knows he needs to raise his trust even more. Suddenly, Hyungjun calls out to him and thanks him sincerely for all the kindness he's shown to his family. He admits he desperately wants to repay the favor, but isn't sure how he can do that right now. In response, Jaehyun decides they should step into the corridor for a talk. Later, once they're out in the corridor, Jaehyun casually asks Hyungjun if he's received citizenship. Now that it's mentioned, a system window suddenly pops up in front of Hyungjun. He admits that this notification appeared for his whole family about 30 minutes ago, confirming they had received citizenship. Jaehyun follows up by asking if anything unusual happened at that time. Hyungjun instantly agrees to this, explaining that they couldn't move their bodies for a short while when it happened. After piecing things together, Jaehyun realizes that people must be temporarily frozen when they're granted citizenship. Seizing the moment, Jaehyun addresses Hyungjun again, this time with a promise. He tells the man he'll do everything in his power to help him return to the life he had before this madness started. Hyungjun is absolutely bewildered by this declaration. But before he can say much, Jaehyun doubles down, promising that he'll protect them from monsters and make sure no creature ever invades their home again. Hyungjun isn't 100% sure if this is even possible, so Jaehyun confidently assures him that yes, it is possible. Still, Hyungjun knows it won't come for free. He directly asks what he would have to do to receive the protection. Jaehyun doesn't beat around the bush either. He makes it clear that there's a risk involved, and Hyungjun might lose his life in the process. He then asks if he is still ready to go through with it. Hyungjun hesitates before responding. After all, who wouldn't value their own life? But since he has a family to protect, he steels up his balls and confidently declares that he's ready to do whatever it takes. He goes on to say that even before Jaehyun showed up, he was already risking his life to go out for food and water to protect his family. Jaehyun smiles, happy to hear this because he's finally gotten the kind of help he needs. Then, Jaehyun remembers Hyungjun holding that golf club earlier and asks him how much it cost. Hyungjun isn't sure why our boy is asking, but he answers anyway, saying it cost him around 500,000 won, more or less. We all know why Jaehyun was asking about the golf club, and he's bummed out after hearing the price tag. He's unsure if he should even list it in his shop right now since he can't afford to blow his money this early. Hyungjun notices his reaction and asks why he suddenly brought it up. Jaehyun quickly brushes off the question, and after shifting the topic, He asks the man if he remembers the day the monsters appeared. Of course, how could Hyungjun forget that day? It was a weekend, and it still traumatizes him whenever he thinks about it. Jaehyun acknowledges this and points out that those who stayed at home that day survived. He reflects how a single goblin doesn't possess much strength, and their levels are lower than an adult male's. The real threat from goblins comes from the fact that they always move in groups. But when you think about it, humans are the same. They have the power to form groups too. That's why he wants to focus on growing his own army. He addresses Hyungjun again, telling him that from now on, they both will be looking for other survivors. With Jaehyun's attractive proposal of supplies in exchange for looking for other survivors, Choi Hyungjun's trust has increased. Our boy is just chilling on his couch, and he's passively becoming trustier. Right now, the kids have a trust level high enough to become vassals, but their parents are a lot more wary of the neighbor. Jaehyun hopes that he can eventually see his family again if he continues to take more people in. His sullen thought was interrupted by a loud shriek downstairs. He hurriedly opened his balcony to check out what's up. In front of the building was what he needed the most. Other people. The group of young men and women are facing off against a horde of goblins. As much as he wants to, it would be hard for Jaehyun to help them in combat. The goblins snarled, and the young man at the forefront took on a flawless pitching form. As soon as that absolute heater of a fastball left his hand, a goblin fell. Its skull cracked. With one of the monsters down, the winning odds of the group just increased. Jaehyun was shocked, to say the least. Then came one of the girls and her bow, launching 2 arrows at once. One shot netted the group with another 2 kills. The remaining goblin was caught off guard as its allies fell so quickly. Then came the batter jumping in the air to bash the last enemy's head in. With sheer force and momentum, the batter vaporized that goblin in a single strike. The other goblins out of range saw their allies getting slaughtered and immediately fled for their lives. It seems like this group is exceptionally competent when it comes to monster hunting. Still on edge, one of the girls heard a loud thud coming from behind. She draws her bowstring, expecting a sneak attack from a pesky goblin. But it was just a ramen packet dropped from above. This is Jaehyun's way of attracting the group's attention. He waved at them to come in, desperate to get the group into the building. He looked like an absolute goof flailing his arms around, but he could not think of anything else that would attract their attention. Suddenly his doorbell rang. Hyungjun must have returned after receiving his quest. Outside the door, Mr. Choi stood nervously while holding a heavy box. Jaehyun welcomed him in, but as soon as Hyungjun tried to walk inside, he was barred by an invisible wall. Jaehyun's system deemed him unqualified to enter the house. He reckoned that the barrier must also apply to citizens. It could be that only registered vassals may enter his domain freely. Since that's the case, Hyungjun just handed his benefactor the box. Inside are all the things that can be used as a weapon in their home. Upon opening, Jaehyun got quite a decent haul. There were knives and a whole toolbox to possibly list at the shop. Jaehyun nonchalantly opened his store and bought 5 water bottles and 5 packets of ramen. Seeing him conjure precious supplies out of thin air nearly knocked Hyungjun on his ass out of shock. Jaehyun placed the supplies into the box and tasked his citizen to go to the first floor and leave them at the entrance. Hyungjun felt a little apprehensive about going downstairs, knowing the danger lay outside. But the young man assured him that it was fine. After observing the enemy's behavior, Jaehyun found out that goblins are only active in broad daylight. The purpose of the supplies is obvious. He wants to use it to bring those people outside over to his domain. In these trying times, the one with food and water holds power. That group will definitely look for him once they realize he has supplies. Jaehyun didn't give Mr. Choi any instructions other than to leave the box downstairs. If he doesn't have to face and fight monsters, the task should be easy. Seeing how receptive Mr. Choi was to his requests, Jaehyun felt compelled to do something nice for him. He opened the quest menu and officially listed the delivery of water and ramen as a quest, adding in a small amount of EXP as a reward upon completion. Mr. Choi was surprised by the quest prompt that popped up in front of him. He asked if the mechanics were similar to video games, and Jaehyun confirmed. Given that Mr. Choi's only at level 9, leveling up to get good rewards is imperative. The reliable dad took a deep breath and braved his way downstairs. With the power still out in most parts of the building, he had to take the stairs. He even took his golf club for protection. From the 20th floor, Big Bro had to walk all the way to the ground floor. Just going down those stairs took a toll on his dad bod. But at least all he has to do is put down the supplies. As soon as he got out, he saw the silhouette of a group flock together and instantly assumed the worst-case scenario. With his paranoia and anxiety, he immediately assumed that he was staring at a pack of vile and disgusting goblins. His first instinct was to get the hell out as fast as he could. But in his rush, Mr. Choi rolled his ankle and fell to the ground. The water bottles and the packs of ramen flew out of the box as he nosedived to the pavement. The pain of falling was real, but his fear of being noticed by the group was more gut-wrenching. He pleaded for his foot to respond and move, fearing that the group might have already noticed him. He felt their presence closing in and pathetically raised his hand to protect his head from an attack. When he heard the silhouette approaching speak human tongue, he felt a mixture of relief and embarrassment. They weren't goblins. They were just a bunch of young'uns. Upstairs, Jaehyun received a notification that unauthorized subjects were trying to enter his domain. To check out what was happening, he opened his ultimate eyes and expanded his all-seeing vision around his territory. Unexpectedly, it seems like Mr. Choi had led the group inside the building. The group was naturally wary of the unfamiliar place. All they knew for sure was that someone threw a ramen packet from the higher floors. That must mean there's food in this building that could remedy their dwindling supplies problem. Jaehyun's system deemed the group eligible for citizenship and prompted him to propose the idea of inviting them to be official citizens. In the process of expanding his territory, he was able to forcefully grant citizenship to the Choi family, since they were already inside his expanded area of influence. But it looks like outsiders are given a choice. If that's the case, the group might just decline his invitation. Just as he was stressing over a contingency plan, the doorbell blared. He took a look at the digital monitor and saw Mr. Choi standing outside once more. Finally thinking of a viable plan, Jaehyun chose to edit Big Bro's quest. He gave Hyungjun a new task to treat the 6 guests to a warm meal. The edits on the quest quickly popped up in Hyungjun's face. Jaehyun urged him to accomplish the quest as he had something in mind. Since the quest seemed innocuous enough, Mr. Choi accepted and walked over to the group. It did not take him long to convince them to go in and go with the plan. With the promise of a decent meal, they can offer citizenship to all 6 of these people. Jaehyun also granted all of them access to his floor. Just like that, the number of his citizens had increased to 10. With the increase in population came a money and EXP boost of 10%. He wasn't expecting to get such good buffs so easily. That boost would undoubtedly be useful on monster hunts. We take those. Looking at the Citizen Management tab, he saw their names, levels, and trust points. On the lead is Ha Dongjeon at level 23 with 19 trust points. As for Kang Deoksu, Kim Ga-young, Yu Hyerin, Kim Gaeon, and Moon Byung-ho, they all hover around levels 10 to 17 with varying trust points. A level 23 metahuman is on the same level of strength as the Calican that Jaehyun killed recently. Curious, he singled out Ha Dongjeon and saw the awakened ability simply called Baseball Throw. It's a D-rank skill that consumes stamina to increase the power of a thrown ball by 3 times. In reality, depending on who throws the baseball, it can become a lethal weapon. But if there's a skill that multiplies its power by 3 times, it becomes an incredibly fearsome weapon. It's a perfect hunting skill to kill monsters. As for Ha Dongjeon's trust, it can steadily be increased in various ways. For now, Jaehyun set the EXP distribution rate for all 6 of them to 70%. With that, he just needs to give these people some monster hunting quests, and he can sit down while passively earning both EXP and cash. He could not help but feel like he was playing an auto-hunting game. But he still needs to get to know these people to gauge if they're a good fit. They could be the key to making his reunion with his family possible after all. Out of the blue, Ha Dongjeon's trust level has increased without Jaehyun doing anything. It wasn't only him. Even Kim Ga-young and Yu Hyerin's trust levels have gone up too. Mr. Choi played the role of a gracious host and welcomed the group into his home. Mrs. Choi came in running, confused as to why they suddenly had so many strangers inside their house. Her husband promised to explain everything later. For now, everyone needs a decent meal. Without prior notice, it would take her a bit of time to prepare something from scratch. But they need her cooking to make Jaehyun's plan possible. She thought for a second and locked in as she accepted the request to cook. It seems like the group of young bloods have manners, especially Ha Dongjeon. As a de facto leader of the squad, he asked Mr. Choi for more info on the man known as Jaehyun. Well, Mr. Choi wasn't exactly sure what Jaehyun's deal was. He doesn't know anything about the young man other than the fact that they've been neighbors for a while now. He added that Jaehyun is quite an intriguing person. He has the ability to restore living conditions before the apocalypse in selected areas after all. That just confirmed Dongjeon's assessment that a metahuman is behind all these resources. He reckoned that Jaehyun must have a broken ability to be capable of giving away precious supplies for free. Thankfully, Dongjeon was smart enough to not get any funny ideas. He reckoned that impressing someone so powerful, no matter what, would be the best move. If they can have someone powerful enough to provide electricity, food, and water on their side, it would be a game changer. In the current world, miraculous abilities are as rare as they are powerful. Since it would take a while to prepare the meal, Mr. Choi asked if the group wanted to take a shower. The young ladies immediately perked up as soon as they heard that they could finally get cleaned up. Since the power is functional, most of the other home facilities can be used too. Mr. Choi smiled and added that they had plenty of warm water available to use. The thought of getting 3 days' worth of grime washed out of their body was heavenly enough. You add warm water to that, and the ladies were hyped. Since the Choi household has a bathroom in the living room and master bedroom, the two ladies can go ahead and wash up first. They looked at him like he was the messiah, but the boys were still apprehensive. Dongjeon reckons that this enigmatic Jaehyun dude must be a metahuman with an ability far more powerful than his. When one of the guys suggested that they beat up their benefactor to see who was stronger, Dongjeon scolded his junior to stop talking nonsense. They should try to impress their benefactor if anything. He even went as far as to beg the lunatic to sit tight, don't do anything stupid, and just stay quiet. In any case, the group's goal is to secure as much food and supplies as they can. They cannot screw up a chance to do that without a fuss, so Dongjeon warned his group to be polite and always read the room. Fortunately, their boneheaded member respects Dongjeon's orders. But one of them was visibly uncomfortable for some unknown reason. Being the good leader that he is, Dongjeon approached the anxious Byung-ho and apologized for dragging him into such a mess. Dongjeon feels guilty for inviting everyone to his housewarming right when the apocalypse struck. Byung-ho tried to brush it off, but his anxious look was palpable. Dongjeon promised that as soon as they secured enough supplies, they would go to the place of Byung-ho's grandmother together. Byung-ho thanked Dongjeon for his consideration, but he knew deep inside that it was already way too late. On the third day of this accursed apocalypse, the possibility of a frail old woman alone in her home still being alive is slim to none, but at least the place is nearby. Dongjeon is optimistic that they can get there as long as they all hang in there and work together. Suddenly, the group's discussion was interrupted by the door opening. The aura of the newcomer was electric. The door creaked open, and all their eyes were glued to the entrance. Dongjeon felt like they were being stalked by a fearsome predator and instinctively gripped his ball, ready to throw at any second. As it turns out, it was just Jaehyun carrying plastic bags in both hands. He overheard the group's conversation and offered to help in their predicament. They all felt a mixture of fear and assurance that the person who just entered might be able to save them from this apocalyptic pit of despair.